41-31 with both sides getting a try bonus point, which sounds like it was an absolute free-flowing try-fest, but it was far from that. That makes it NOLA have got 3 try bonus point wins on the trot, so congratulations to them to top the table. And with me to go through all... I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. I should introduce myself. It was rather rude of me not to. Sorry. And joining me to go through all of the action is Rob from America Rugby in America. Jeez. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I've been up since 4 a.m. after watching England versus France, so that might be why I'm stumbling over some of my words.
You didn't sleep through the second half of that one?
I didn't sleep through the second half. I did go back to bed after the game, though. So I have had a little nap.
All right.
So, some interesting ones here. This is the first time that NOLA have been behind in a game, as Seattle got themselves a penalty early on. That's a bit of an amazing stat. 3rd game in.
Yeah, step 1, let's get the internationals back. Step 2, let's see if NOLA is anything close to what they've looked like in the first 2 weeks, where they've outscored the entire comp and other than for a brief time today, haven't trailed anybody.
You're getting onto the end of the sort of the questions at the end of the comp as to
showing
as to how what does this mean going forwards? But I mean. First time behind. They did well to respond, because Seattle definitely had the better of that first half, but their line-out really was not functioning tonight.
You're right. The line-out didn't function. The passing didn't function. The ball handling didn't function. I actually thought in the sort of the middle stretch middle stretch of the first half, where it looked like Seattle might get their act together, I thought they would. They'd start catching the ball and they'd look like the defending champs. And boy, no sooner did I say that than it fell apart.
But a lot of that was down, I think, to the NOLA yellow card for the no arms chop tackle to the shins, which saw the number 12 go off in. I missed out what the time was, but it was around the kind of the 20-minute markish, and that allowed Seattle to score a nicely worked try off the top of a line out. A couple of people in the live chat on Facebook saying forward pass, but hey, you risk those and you get away with quite a few of them.
Well, a couple of people are right. There was a forward pass in there, but yeah, otherwise a well worked try.
One of the few times actually that Seattle got to attack NOLA with NOLA's forwards all tied into one space. And I think that was something that, because that Seattle line-out wasn't working, they didn't get that opportunity to do so later on. And NOLA's forwards put in a big shift today for that side.
Yeah, and there's 2 things sort of interesting about that. One is, Seattle's supposed to be the seawall. They're supposed to have the preeminent forwards in the comp. Maybe again with the internationals gone, that's not the case, and it'll go back to the way that it was. And then, secondly, Seattle's success looked like it was going to come from the edges in this match. And, when you can't get the ball out to the edges and that's where it needs to be, you're going to struggle. And they did. Well, they could get it out there. They just couldn't catch it once they did.
No, that's true. But if we look at how NOLA scored, I'll be honest, I missed the second week's game because of lots of buffering. But in the opening game against Toronto Arrows, NOLA scored their points out wide. But in this game, the way they came back into it was line out mauls, to bash over, and then again a line out maul that turned into a penalty try. A very different style of play. In that last sort of 10 minutes of the first half to get themselves in the lead.
And the commentators touched on it. One of the sort of impressive things about NOLA over the first 3 weeks is they've literally scored every which way you can possibly score. They've looked like a well-balanced, well-oiled machine. I'm wondering what happened. Whatever it was that they did in the last 6 months, it's worked. This was not the NOLA team that we watched last year.
No, it's not, and they have taken everyone by surprise in the picks. Even though they'd won their first 2 games, everybody in the Run of Sports who I do some work with had predicted Seattle to win this one, even though Seattle won last weekend. So yes, you're going to see NOLA climbing up those power rankings on that'll all come out next week, and I think there'll be a lot of people jumping onto the Gold Rush bandwagon from here on in.
I mean, you can't do better than outscoring literally the entire competition the first 3 weeks.
Very true. They've also let in an awful lot of points as well. I'm just going to quickly check if the tables tell me. No, they don't. There's going to be points difference, which is obviously which at the moment they did 24 points. They've scored 24 more points than they've let in. But they've, as you say, they have scored a lot of points, but they've also let in quite a few as well. But they came out of that second half, came out of half time, and really put it to Seattle there. Because in that first half, they spent a lot of time in their own half, with Seattle basically eventually coughing up the ball, and then sort of getting a few points towards the end. In that first half, they came out, dominated at the beginning of the second half, and really pulled away.
Yeah, that's probably a credit to the coaches, right? Because, anytime you can go into the sheds at halftime and come back out and play like the house is on fire, that's a credit to whatever adjustments, whatever speech, or maybe give it to the captain too. Whatever went on at halftime in terms of motivation obviously worked. I have a basketball team that I coach that maybe I need those guys to come talk to.
So they got a penalty. It looked like because they got a 5-meter scrum and couldn't get a couple of those. Seattle held them out, and you thought, okay, perhaps this is where it's going to swing again. But no, NOLA managed to bash over for another one, and that's when around about that sort of 50th minute they started to play with a bit more width, throwing around a bit, and I think and it didn't really come off for them, so they reverted to type. Which I think was a correct thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, again, the ability to make those sort of in-game, on-the-fly adjustments. When you say that they started to play wide, I do wonder a little bit how that came about. If that was something they sort of consciously did, or if they subconsciously did it and realized it wasn't the thing to do and went back. But whatever the case, the ability to adjust and stop the Seattle rally was impressive. That's a rare thing in any sport, to be able to kill a rally like that.
Totally. And as we say in rugby, every side will get its opportunities, its upper hand, and it's a question of whether you take your points when you do that. And Seattle did well mixing their forwards and backs coming around the corner. And I felt in this talking about the two different styles of defence, is that Seattle had a very aggressive line speed, looking at trying to force you back and then make you kick, whereas the NOLA defence was much more bend and don't break. We're happy to give you yards, but we're going to trust that we'll always stop you, and that eventually you'll knock on. It was an interesting dynamic as a difference between the two different styles to me.
Yeah, and in some sense, both made sense, right? I mean, NOLA, whether from watching film or however they came up with it, the idea that they were going to let Seattle make the mistakes and sort of stop themselves clearly was effective. On the Seattle side, I think the tactic of trying to play with some line speed makes some sense. Seattle couldn't overcome the myriad mistakes that they made. I don't think it was tactical as much as it was just discipline and fundamentals.
Yeah, and it's something that last season also they came second in the table and they went on to win the whole thing. But again, their lesser performances were on the road, and we're seeing that again. That travelling is perhaps going to be an issue for the Seattle side.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're going to have to bear in mind with the table 3 weeks in, right? Is the MLR has purposely constructed the schedule where you've got the southern teams playing home games early with the idea that the weather would be better down there, and they're probably right. But with for a team like Seattle, who's going to have a backloaded home schedule and the internationals back, they've still got a run in them. and it's coming. They're still one of the best teams in the competition, and ultimately that's going to come to light.
It is, but we've seen some impressive depth from NOLA. Particularly impressed by Feeks, who came in because the starting fly half is out concussed at the moment. So a pivotal role, a role that where if you haven't, where you can easily run out of depth quickly. But yeah, no, he came in and played a good game there, even if he did get away with a high tackle at one point during that second half.
Yeah, and you're right about the depth. I mean, again, for a team that struggled during the first season of MLR to come in and not only have a first 15 that looks impressive against the champs, but have a couple of guys out injured and have replacements come in and look impressive, and the bench look decent. Again, whatever Nola's done since last summer has clearly worked.
It has, and so Seattle pulled it back within 10. They pulled back two tries actually. So they pulled it back within 3. Mm-hmm. They kicked it over the line, which gave Seattle the territory from the restart, and then just kept NOLA down there, and eventually managed to bash over for their try to bring it up to 27-24. But then it was so with 50 minutes to go. It's only a 3-point game. We're thinking, okay, this one's really in the balance now. We're going to see the character of the sides, but again, we just saw Seattle's mistakes really hurting them.
Yeah, you got it exactly right. It was the character of the side. So I got it here in my notes. Seattle lost a line out, an attacking line out, and then immediately committed a penalty right around midfield. And the next thing you knew, NOLA was dotting down in the try zone. That was that. So Seattle climbed that mountain to get back in the game, and then once they got there, they exhaled, and that was that.
Yeah, exactly. And those 2 tries, you were talking earlier about how NOLA has scored in many different ways, but all the tries up to this point have been, or the first 3 tries were all kind of bashed over. The last 2 tries were spun out wide and were running tries by the backs, which pulled it out. It was kind of amusing to hear the commentators going, "Oh, this the game's still not over." At 41-24 with 8 minutes left, yes, this game as a result was over. So
they're selling commercials, Paul. I mean, they have to keep somebody watching. So you're right. That thing was over at 41-24. But they want you to watch the last 5 minutes, and then when you're done, you got to be ready to tune into Paul.
Well, absolutely. So Seattle did keep going, and they could easily have just gone, hey, this game's over. We've had enough, but they kept on going and got that 4th try for the bonus point. They did find a gap down the middle of NOLA, and NOLA did have did give up some line breaks down the middle in that second half as they were tiring, but their scramble defence on the whole contained it. This time they couldn't because it was too close to the try line, and then they basically. Everyone's like, okay, so suddenly Seattle could get 2 points out of this. They had one more play, but again, errors meant that the ball just got kicked out, and it was game over.
Yeah, and I think I think you mentioned earlier the fact that NOLA's given up some points in addition to scoring some, and you also mentioned that up till today they played with the lead for the entirety of their matches. The propensity for giving up a few is probably a function of playing from ahead, and that last try was a function of NOLA playing from ahead. So I don't think you can take either side of the ball. I don't think you can take anything away from NOLA in the way they played the first 3 weeks. They've been clearly the most impressive team in the comp, and the table reflects it.
Absolutely. Another one of the things I should mention when Seattle came back with those 2 tries. That again is something that NOLA has done in every one of their games. In the opening game, they had a big lead and then let the Arrows close that up in the second half. And I understand they did something similar last weekend against the Raptors. So yeah, that's an area for it. One thing coaches like is a win where you can find something to work on. And so I think the coach will be happy with this game because again they've got something to work on in that mid second half attention.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's really hard just from a from a human standpoint. Once you get ahead, to find a way to keep your foot on the gas pedal and not let up and have somebody creep back into a game. And you're right. I'm sure that's something that the NOLA coaching staff is going to preach. But on the other hand, on the list of problems that you could possibly have, finding a way to sort of step on somebody's throat because you're playing with a big lead all the time is relatively low among them. I think everyone down there in New Orleans is doing a pretty good job.
No, absolutely. So some of the stats that I collected during the game, NOLA had, I reckon, about 9 lineouts, whereas Seattle had about 14. But Seattle just couldn't claim those lineouts. Pretty even on the scrums, 7 and 6, which isn't too bad. So the handling was all right today. But the penalty count definitely went against NOLA. They gave up, I think, 12 penalties plus that yellow card to only 7 by Seattle. And against a side that's not making those knock-on errors and is nailing their lineouts, that could really hurt them. But if you're giving up penalties, the other side kicks downfield for their own lineout and then they lose it. Hey, who really cares?
Yeah, you're right. And so, set the penalties aside, and obviously they matter. But if you set the penalties aside, find the big mistake that NOLA made in the course of that match. I don't think it exists. So for all the handling errors, the lineouts, so at times the poor kicking that Seattle had, outside of, and most of those, about half of those 12 penalties were in the first, 8 or 10 minutes. Outside of that, man, NOLA did a lot right and very little wrong, and Seattle was the opposite.
Absolutely. Let's just touch on the other two games we had this weekend then. Austin Elite 19, Toronto Arrows 23. So a third loss for Austin. They're at the bottom of a lot of people's power rankings. I think they've got a long old season ahead of them.
Yeah, I actually thought Austin might find a way to get that one done at home against a team that's missing some internationals and traveling down from Canada. If you can't win that match, you're in trouble. There's not a lot of bright side for you to look toward. Who are you going to beat and where are you going to beat them if you can't get a sort of down Toronto team on the road.
Yeah, I mean that's when we're talking about Austin's opening 3 games, beaten by the Sabercats, who people don't rate, then beaten by Utah Warriors, who have lost some key players in the off season, and then beaten by Toronto Arrows, an expansion team that are missing their internationals. Yeah, it's going to be a long old season for Austin, unfortunately. But that's got to be really positive for Toronto. Playing their first 8 games away from home, their second game they pick up a win. That's going to be a good morale boost for them.
Absolutely. I actually thought Toronto would start a little stronger than they did. So you're right. Positive sign for Toronto. I hope we're wrong about Austin and they find a way to turn it around a little bit, because that's a market that MLR needs, and it would certainly be nice if the team were at least competitive. Yep.
And then San Diego saw off the Sabercats at home, 17-13. Really tight one there. Actually, the other game was only by 4 points, let's be honest. So the first 2 games both had losing bonus points. But yeah, tight one there that could have gone either way towards the end of that game. The Sabercats much improved on last season. A lot of people had them ranked really kind of low.
Yeah, boy, they are improved. I think San Diego, though, is a team that gets hurt as much as anybody by losing the internationals, and maybe not coincidentally, the guy that came on in the last 10 minutes and really helped them get those last 2 tries to win the match was Nate Augsburger, who's normally a mainstay with the Eagles, but has been out. For San Diego, I don't think it's a coincidence that that's the guy that comes on and puts you over the hump. So we're gonna have to watch Houston. Houston's either a team that's improved and now competitive, or they're a team that maybe has caught a couple of teams a little bit weak, and we'll see what happens from here.
Yep, San Diego. The big problem from the last year was their scrum, but that's really been tightened up, which is great to see. And when I say it was close, if we look the reason I say that is it took 2 tries in the last 10 minutes, I think it was, for them to win this. So yes, going into the last 10 minutes they were down 3-13, but they managed to hold out, stop the Houston from scoring any points in that second half, and racked up 14 in the last 10 minutes to win it. So yeah, a team that's never say die attitude, an improved scrum. We should, and as you say, impacted by the ARC in particular, a team to keep an eye on as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think San Diego is going to get a lot better. I mean, you look up front where they absolutely did struggle last year, and it seems like in the first 3 weeks, Patty Ryan, who they got from the Southern Hemisphere, seems like he's a one-man scrum almost unto himself. He's really helped. J.P. Peterson has really helped them. Basically, they went and did some recruiting in the off season, and it's helped a lot. And when you throw the U.S. internationals back in there, I think San Diego is going to be pretty good.
Yep. So for a quick look at the table, then let's go bottom up. We've got Austin Elite at the bottom there, which we've already talked about. Glendale Raptors not playing this weekend, but 2 games, 2 losing bonus points. Not what we'd expect from a side that only lost 1 game during the regular season last year.
No, they again. I mean, moving the MLR schedule from the spring and summertime when it was last year, and I guess we did lose some players to junior internationals last year, but moving it from the spring and the summertime where it was last year to now when you're starting off with, well, I guess the internationals were there the first week, but after that they're gone for several. That really puts Glendale at a disadvantage too. In fact, if Glendale and San Diego are the 2 teams that get hurt by that the most probably, and Glendale's really been hurt by it.
So don't write them off yet. Then we have 2 teams that have only had 1 game so far, which is Rooney and Utah Warriors, both on 4 points. That's 7. They're both sort of 6 equal. 2 sides, yeah. With only 1 game, there's still a lot more to learn from that. Houston in 5th with 5 points, picking up that losing bonus point, climbs them up there. I think a lot of us will be surprised if they don't slip a bit further down the table as the season goes on. But it's good to see them competitive so far.
Yeah, that helps. The more parity you've got, probably the better for MLR. And Houston's a big market. Well, Texas is a big market for MLR. So if you can get Houston and you can get Austin competitive, that helps everybody.
Yeah, especially as the Austin Huns were part of the initial people who kind of led this whole tournament being set up. It'd be a real shame if they can't become a competitive side. Now you've got to remember, though, as I say, Utah. And one of the problems with this table is that the different amount of games people have played. And perhaps we need to have a table that has average points per game, because you've got, I say, Utah and Rooney have only played 1 game each, but Seattle have played 3 games, sit in 4th place. But as you say, we've talked about them already. That the second half of the year should be easier for them. Toronto in 3rd, also on 6 points. Again, a team that needs to get some early momentum because they've got their first 8 games away from home and then 8 games at home. And then San Diego and New Orleans Gold, the top 2, who we've also mentioned from their games today. So doing well. New Orleans Gold, I think the big questions around them are going to be how do they travel? So they have 3 games at home.
Yep.
And as you say, the ARC impact, because they've played the Raptors and the Seawolves. If you're going to try and play those 2 teams, playing them during an international break is probably the time you want to be getting them.
Yeah, I mean, we know who sort of bribed the MLR officials, right? I mean, if you're Utah and you're Rooney and you get to play 1 game during ARC, well, I mean, there's still some ARC left, but you've only had to play 1 game in the first 3 weeks, so the international's gone for 2 of them, and then you're Toronto and you've backloaded your schedule with 8 home games. That they probably need to clean that up a bit. I struggle to understand why Rooney isn't in Utah this weekend playing the Warriors. I understand the rationale behind a team like Toronto, a team like Seattle going south for the first several weeks, but ultimately that's sort of an imbalance that you've got to correct. That's not fair. That's not going to be fair coming down the stretch when the Arrows, maybe not this year when they're an expansion team, but in the future, you got the Arrows playing 8 straight home games to clean up the season, and meanwhile the San Diegos and the Houstons of the world are traveling all over the place for 2 straight months. That doesn't quite work.
Yeah, once we get domes like they have in the NFL, then perhaps we don't have to worry about weather. But I guess the problems are that, as you say, your New York Toronto and Seattle all struggle with snow at this time of the year and the cold. And then when we get into the latter part of the season, into your sort of Junes, Julys, I can't remember exactly when the final is, but your Texas and California are going to be extremely hot during that part of the season as well. So getting the player, so from a weather point of view, it makes sense for the southern hemisphere. Sorry, the deep south teams to kind of play early and then travel in the second half and vice versa. It balances from a weather point of view, but as you say, it does create an imbalanced season. And trying to figure out, we'll see teams, I think, shift on the table quite dramatically during the latter part of the season, and that's going to be we can't just say, oh, someone's high up now, therefore they're going to go well later in the season.
Yeah, you're right. But there's other ways to deal with the weather stuff. I mean, from a snow and rain standpoint, there's no dome in the NFL in Buffalo, New York. There's no dome in Green Bay, and they still manage to play outside and down south in the southern part of the country when it gets warm later in the season, play a night game or 5. Historically, both when we tried the pro comp and then this comp last year, they were playing midday weekend games in New Orleans and Houston and in July. That's just crazy. You don't want to do that. You don't need to do that. I'm pretty sure that field in New Orleans has got lights on it. Let's turn them on and play at night.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you very much for joining me yet again. Next weekend, just having a quick look forward to next weekend's games. And we have a full round of 4 games next weekend. So NOLA get their 4th home game on the trot, hosting Rooney or Rugby United New York. We then have San Diego hosting the Utah Warriors, Austin Elite hosting Glendale, and Seattle Seawolves hosting Toronto. So what's your pick of those games for next week?
Wow, that's a good question. I want to see Rooney play again. They looked competitive at San Diego in the first game. I want to see how they do. They were one of the teams that had some of the marquee off-season signings in the comp. I'm curious to see if they can get their first win.
I'm going to pick that San Diego Legion versus Utah Warriors one. I was expecting Utah to struggle, having lost players like Kurt Marath and Paul Asike, who were part of that kind of decision-making axis, but they did really well in round 2 when they beat Austin comfortably. So I want to see if that's just playing a weak side or whether they are going to be a force this season. So I'm looking forward to the San Diego against Utah. I think that'll be a good barometer as to where they stand. So catch those games next week, and I will endeavour to give post-match reaction to one of the games, and so don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and also there'll be a couple of, for those of you watching the recording, there'll be a couple of suggested videos over here. I think it is that right way around? I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe over there that the YouTube algorithm says are perfect for you. Don't forget to follow Rob at Rugby in America on Twitter, and I'm at DrivingMaul on Twitter. Thank you very much, Rob.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And have a good day, everybody.